Okay, so in our last video we talked about the magic pattern. Now, here's the thing about the Aristotle example. In the Aristotle example, all of the parts match up perfectly. The problem is that is not going to happen. I mean, it might happen with regard to some elements or factors, or whatever the case may be, but it's not likely to happen on an exam fact pattern. The whole point of an exam fact pattern is to get you to see whether the facts pull the trigger. Let me tell you how we draft exams. Law professors never sleep. And if you were at my brain training, you've heard this. We don't sleep. We hang upside down from the rafters, right, in the attic. And we spend 24 hours a day, if we're not teaching or grading, we spend the rest of our time figuring out ways, conjuring ways to create mismatches between positions 4 and 1, right? So that the A's don't match. At least they don't match on their face, right? We create some kind of mismatch, we mess it up to make you have to figure out whether the facts actually pull the trigger. That's how exam questions work. We make you figure out whether the facts of position 4 pull the rule trigger at position 1. Now, once we do repetitive exercises on this structure, you'll find that your mind starts to ignore all of the other positions of the syllogism. The real question, the deep issue in any case, is whether the facts so when you're talking about drafting a really artful issue statement, the real question that has to be answered is whether 4 meets 1. So let me give a burglary example. I'm trying to use a simple example. If you break, then the first element of burglary is met. That's your if then. Let's say we're applying it to Sam. And Sam brushed against an open door on his way into a house with his left shoulder. Okay, that's the fact pattern. Now, the issue there is not whether Sam committed burglary. The issue there is not really, I mean, in terms of the deep issue, it's no problem saying the issue is whether Sam committed the first element of burglary. I mean, you're not going to lose points for that. But what's the real question? If the rule trigger is breaking and the facts say brushed against an open door with shoulder, when I've already told you that the deep issue in any case is whether the facts at position 4 pull the trigger at position 1, you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, the question I'm answering here, I have to answer here because I'm focusing on those two spots, right? I'm not focusing on the then, I'm focusing on the if, and I'm focusing on the facts to see whether they meet the if. The real question that needs to be answered, see if this makes sense, is not whether Sam committed burglary or whether Sam committed the first element of burglary. The real question that needs to be answered is whether brushing against an open door with your shoulder is a breaking. That's the question that needs to be answered. Again, you sort of ignore positions 2, 3, 5, and 6. You go straight for 4 and 1, right? Do the facts meet? And so again, the more we do repetitive exercises on this, the more your mind is going to start doing this. That's why I call it brain training. It's the idea is not to throw this at you and say this is the way you're supposed to do it. That'd be like Tiger Woods diagramming a golf swing on a blackboard and telling you to go compete on the PGA Tour. Right. The point here is to get out on the range and swing. As you do repetitive exercises on this, your brain starts to do this, and you need to get your brain to start doing this instead of focusing on the other parts of the argument. So in this example, if you do wrong, here's just a rule, right? If you do wrong, you should be punished. Sounds like a rule. And sure it is. Doing wrong is your rule trigger, and be punished is the consequence. So that makes sense. Now, the rule would probably be stated, you should be punished for doing wrong. So again, your brain has to switch these propositions into ifs and thens. What causes what? If I say you should be punished for doing wrong, your brain has to say, well, the condition that would have to be met would be wrong. That's what causes the punish, right? So you have to get that causal effect down. So if you do wrong, then you should be punished. let's say we're applying it to Tracy. So now here's what I'm saying. This is what law professors do to you. If I was being nice, the fact pattern would simply say, Tracy did wrong. Then there's nothing left to do. It says, right, wrong at position 1. The facts at position 4 say wrong. And so there's no work to do here. The trigger has been pulled. There is a match. There's no weakness in the argument. So what we do is we do something like this. I'll tell you, Tracy, here's at position 4, the facts. And you need to use facts with specificity. The facts, not some characterization of the facts or some opinion about the facts. The worst thing, of course, to do is skip the facts. That happens all the time. Tracy lied and told her cousin that he looked handsome. So now stop for a minute and tell me what the real question is here. And realizing the real question is not whether Tracy should be punished. The real question is what? And hopefully you answered. The real question here is whether 4 meets 1, which is, right, whether lying and telling somebody they look handsome is wrong. That's the real question. Now, once you've identified a question, I'll talk more about this later. Again, just do some basics here. Once you've identified a question, obviously then you have to address it and try to answer it. And you do that with sub-rules that we call definitions. You do that with comparisons, analogical reasoning, comparing this case to other cases, right, that have already been decided, and you do that using common sense. You're allowed to have common sense. That's your analytical toolkit. But before you answer the question by applying definitions and comparisons and common sense, before you answer it using those tools, you have to identify what it is. If you never even ask the question, then you're obviously not going to try to answer it. And I'm telling you that this is what happens on exams, is a failure to understand the mismatch, right, between the facts and the rule trigger. Let's try again. First element of battery, if there's no, you have to have a harmful or offensive touching. Well, you can't have a harmful or offensive touching with no touching at all. So let's just say that the first element of battery is touching. And I'm not trying to teach other doctrinal areas, by the way. Go with what your professor says. I'm just using an example. So if I'm a professor and I'm testing battery, and the first element of battery is a touching, and if I've decided I'm going to test on that, well, I'm not going to tell you then that Sven, we're applying this to Sven, that Sven touched, that's too easy. I'm going to create some kind of mismatch to make you work for it. That's, again, what professors do. We create mismatches between 4 and 1, see if you catch it, see if you know what the real question is, and see how you resolve it. So you know now that the A's have to match at positions 4 and 1. Already, probably, your brain is starting to go right to position 4. And that's the order, by the way. Position 4 and 1. 4 and 1. Does 4 meet 1? Does 4 meet 1? Do the facts pull the trigger? Do the facts pull the trigger? So I tell you, Sven, so touching is not position 1. First element met is position 2. It's often very simple like that. Position 2 is the element is met or the factor is met, whatever the case may be. Then we see Sven show up at position 3. That's the person we're applying the rule to. The facts show up at position 4. The specific facts are blue smoke in Jamie's face. And all you need to know is 4 and 1. The issue here is not whether Sven, the real issue, the deep issue, is not whether Sven committed the first element of battery. The deep question here, the one that really needs to be answered, is whether blowing smoke in somebody's face is a touching. You tell a kid, if you do your chores, it's more likely that we'll go to Disneyland this weekend. So the rule trigger here is chores. The rule consequence is Disneyland, right? Any kid's dream. Who are we applying it to? Emily. So we have positions 1, 2, and 3. So far, idea 1 is chores, idea 2 is Disneyland, idea 3 is Emily. Now, again, if we were being nice about this, I would just tell you then that Emily did her chores, right? Then there'd be a perfect match between 4 and 1. All of the parts match, and then positions 5 and 6 rate themselves. Instead, I told you that Emily made her bed. Now, what you don't want to do is, in your head, do the work without doing it on paper. Right? You might say, well, everybody knows making your bed is part of the chores, so I'm just going to say Emily did her chores. No, 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 that's not what the facts say. The facts say Emily made her bed. The rule trigger is chores. So what's the issue? And yes, you should have said 4 and 1, right? The A's, the question is whether making her bed was part of her chores. How about this one? If you're in a hot environment, then you need more water. If, then, if, then. Of course, we're just making up silly rules here just to practice this. If hot environment, then need more water. Okay, who are we applying it to? Harold. Okay, where's Harold? In the desert. What's the issue here? Too many people are going to say there is no issue, right? The rule says if you're in a hot environment, you need more water. Sam's in the desert. I don't see the problem. I'm sorry, Harold's in the desert. Obviously, Harold needs more water. No, not so fast. Again, you have to be specific with the facts. The facts say Sam is in a desert. Harold is in the desert. So what is the issue here? Actually, whether it's Harold or Sam doesn't matter, as you know, because we're looking at 4 and 1. The issue here is whether the desert is a hot environment. And anybody who knows deserts, by the way, knows that's an interesting question. So you get the idea here. To reason your way through a legal problem, what you need the rule trigger, the condition of the rule, right? The if. You need the operative facts, right? The specific operative facts. Once you have those, the deep issue, writes itself, because the deep issue is always whether the operative facts meet the condition of the rule, right? Whether the facts pull the trigger. Once you've identified the deep question, the deep issue in the case, then you need your analytical toolkit. You need to apply any more specific definitions, any analogies that you have, and use your common sense. You use what you can. Sometimes you don't have one of those. Well, you should hopefully always have common sense, but sometimes you lack a definition or you lack any comparisons. You use what you have to try to resolve the case. So we're going to be talking about that pattern here now, throughout much of the term, because I want, as we prepare for actually tackling essays and not just multiple choice questions, although the same reasoning applies, but now you have to write it all out, right? I want you to get used to this. Okay, what's the rule trigger here? What are the facts here? Do the facts pull the trigger, right? And applying your analytical toolkit for figuring that out. So I hope this structure is helpful. Again, I do not like the idea of law students getting all the way through law school without training in this. I'm sorry if this doesn't sound like con law, but it's stuff you need to know. You need to know this for con law and every other course. So that's enough for the brain training stuff. Now, in the next video, we're going to apply this to Lopez, and then we'll do the same thing with Morrison. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned.